Welcome to Glory Days. I'm Nick Brookes and today we're going to be talking basketball. By 1997, Michael Jordan's legacy as the greatest player basketball had seen was secured. He carried the Bulls to a three-peat of NBA titles between 91 and 93, winning Finals MVP in all 3 years. After a couple of seasons away from basketball, when he tried to make it in Major League Baseball, Jordan returned to the NBA and carried the Bulls to another title in 96. Yet for some people, winning's insatiable, and in 97 Jordan did something unthinkable. For my money, one of the greatest shows of skill and courage from any sports person ever. Let's talk about the flu game. In 96-97, the Bulls were a force. During the regular season, they racked up a 69-13 record, losing just twice at home. They cruised through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, barely breaking a sweat. By the time June and the finals rolled around, most pundits had them favourites to be back-to-back NBA champions. But their opponents were commanding in their own right. Through the regular season, the Utah Jazz were a baby step behind the Bulls, compiling a 64-18 record and losing just 3 times on home court. What's more, in Karl Malone and John Stockton, they were powered by a duo almost as dynamic as Jordan and Pippen. Stockton was a skinny 6'1" white dude who looked like he'd be at home in a library. Yet across 13 seasons in the NBA, he'd proved his toughness and tenacity time and again. An old-school point guard and a thinking man's hooper, Stockton would end up as the NBA record holder for both steals and assists, and remains the only NBA player to have multiple 25-assist games. He could score the ball inside and out, and knew every inch of the court like the back of his hand. Karl Malone, meanwhile, was a beast on both ends of the floor, a rugged defender who rebounded with relish, an offensive threat who could wreak havoc in the post. Play after play, he'd do damage with his back to the basket, rising into hook shots, pivoting into fadeaways, magicking up no-look passes with precision. He got to the free throw line more than anyone in the league, had a soft touch around the rim, and wasn't afraid to use his 6'9" frame to slam the ball down. Like Jordan, he'd been named All-Defense and All-NBA, yet his averages of 27, 10 and 4.5 were enough to see him pip Mike and be named as the NBA's MVP. Around the league, he was nicknamed the Mailman, a reflection on the fact that he always delivered. Of all the duos in the league, Stockton and Malone were arguably the most compelling. They played fast and hard, no one ran the pick and roll better, and many felt the pair were the 2 toughest players in the NBA. That was music to the ears of Jazz coach Jerry Sloan, a believer in hard-nosed basketball who wouldn't accept anything less than 100%. "Heart's what makes the difference" was one of his favourite slogans, and his team had plenty of it. In the conference finals, they'd outlasted a Rockets side, headlined by Barkley, Drexler, and Hakeem the Dream. Many felt the Bulls hadn't faced a more daunting foe. But for Jordan, the MVP snub was extra motivation. A showpiece series against Malone was an opportunity to prove he was still the best player in the league. Game 1 was a tight affair. With the scores tied and 9.2 seconds left on the clock, Malone missed a pair of crucial free throws. Up the other end of the floor, Jordan got the ball in his hands and hit a 20-foot jump shot right on the buzzer. Bulls 84, Jazz 82. It was Jordan's game, yet the signs were that the series would be a nervy back-and-forth affair. But Game 2 was also Jordan's. He shot 11 of 20 from the field and filled the stat sheet with 38, 13 and 9 as Malone and the Jazz struggled to keep pace. A blowout victory had the Bulls 2-0 up. Heading back to Utah, it looked like Jordan had put the MVP debate to bed and like the series might be over before it truly got going. Still, home court advantage can so often change things, and the 2 teams looked totally different in Salt Lake City. The local crowd was raucous. Despite 7 threes from Pippen, the Bulls were way off the Jazz. Malone had 37 and 10. At one point in the fourth quarter, Chicago were 24 points down. This wasn't close, but it was certainly testy. After the game, Rodman told a reporter, "It's difficult to get in sync because of all the fucking Mormons out here." Naturally, his words went down like a ton of bricks. Game 4 was a tighter affair, but John Stockton came alive in its dying embers. He hit a big 3 late on, With the game into its final minute and the Jazz trailing by a single point, he threw a Hail Mary pass the whole length of the floor to set up Malone for a straightforward layup. The crowd went wild. The Jazz had clawed their way back. After 4 games, there was nothing to pick between the two teams. The series had had a strange sense of symmetry so far. Clearly, it was going to go down to the wire. The teams would stay in Salt Lake for Game 5. Late on the eve of the clash, Jordan was hungry and decided to order a pizza. Alarm bells should have started ringing when 5 guys turned up to deliver it, but Mike ate the pie without thinking. It was a decision which could have profoundly altered the playoff series and the whole Bulls' legacy. At about 3 a.m, Jordan woke up, sick to his stomach, clearly down with food poisoning. His trainer found him curled up in the fetal position. In his mind, there was no way Jordan could take the floor that evening. He missed the afternoon shoot-around and couldn't hold down any food, yet come game night, there he was, hobbling into the arena in his trademark grey suit, ready to leave it all out there in pursuit of another championship. Really, it should be dubbed the food poisoning game, but the flu game sounds catchier. If you've ever had food poisoning, you'll understand its debilitating effects, the nausea, the dehydration, that feeling like you're going to die. It was unfathomable that Jordan thought he could compete in a crunch game of playoff basketball in such a condition. Yet the will to win was clearly stronger than the sickness in his stomach. Still, for stretches of the first quarter, it looked like he had nothing to give. He was lethargic in the early goings, a shadow of his usual athletic self. In the first minutes, he had the ball stripped driving for a layup, then bricked a 10-foot jumper high off the backboard. The Jazz thrived off weakness. Maybe this was a bad idea. While Jordan was struggling to stand, Malone and Stockton were running and gunning. Early in the second, the lead was 16. And at every timeout, you could see how much Jordan was suffering. Whenever the clock stopped, he'd sit exhausted, drenched in sweat, covered in cool towels and ice packs, desperately trying to take on fluids. Surely, it didn't matter that we were looking at the greatest player in the game's history. This guy had no business being on a basketball court. He had 4 points through the first stanza as the Bull went 5 for 17 from the floor. Yet somehow he flicked a switch in the second. Suddenly, he was making shots from everywhere, dishing out dimes, getting to the line. Late in the first half, he even managed a putback. It didn't matter how sick he felt. He was out there competing. By half-time, the Bulls had cut the deficit to 4. Unbelievably, Jordan had 21. Yet maintaining that level of physical exertion across 48 minutes was impossible. At times, Jordan staggered, hunched over, exhausted. He looked out on his feet. Through the third quarter, he managed a single field goal. Yet the mailman had gone missing too. Through the second half, Malone only made 1 bucket. But the Jazz clung on to the lead. Did the Bulls have enough in the locker to overturn it? It would be a tall order. With 10 minutes left on the clock, Utah led by 8. Yet out of nowhere, with the finish line in sight, Jordan started making shots. He hit a wide-open 3 to bring the Bulls level. Like heavyweight boxers, these two great teams were going blow for blow, taking chunks out of each other. With 45 seconds on the clock, Jordan hit a free throw to tie the game at 85. He missed the second, yet somehow managed to grab the rebound, dribbling to half court, getting the ball to Pippen. With 10 on the shot clock, Pippen posted up and found Jordan on the perimeter. The three-point shot was perfect. Somehow, the Bulls had the lead. Jordan slumped into Pippen's arms. As the final buzzer sounded, the Jazz looked incredulous. Jordan had played 44 minutes, notching 38 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists and 3 steals. Somehow, I found the energy, he told reporters after the game. There could be no doubt he'd left it all on the floor. It had been worth every ounce of struggle. The game turned the series in the Bulls' favour. 2 nights later, back in Chicago, they were NBA champions for the 5th time in 7 years. Could that have happened without Jordan battling through food poisoning? Going into Game 5, the Jazz were 10-0 at home in the postseason. It's hard to imagine Pippen and Rodman would have had enough to get past them without Jordan making shot after crucial shot. It's a well-worn adage that Game 5s often decide series. Had the Jazz claimed a 3-2 lead, would it have given them the impetus to snatch the title? Would we look back on the Bulls dynasty and Jordan's career in the same way were it not for the second three-peat? Those hypotheticals are impossible to answer. As it was, Jordan never lost an NBA Finals. He was Finals MVP in all 6 of the Bulls' championship runs, and in '98 accolades arrived from every direction. He was the league and finals MVP, the most valuable player in the All-Star game, the scoring champion, and part of the all-defensive first team for the 9th time. The driving force behind 2 three-peats, his legacy was secured. But how big a part of the Jordan legend was the flu game? Was this one of the greatest achievements in basketball and in all of sport? Drop me a line and tell me your thoughts.